The candle market in 2026 is crowded, but the opportunity isn't gone, it's evolved. The era of viral candle brands built on aesthetics is fading. The winners now aren't craft influencers, they're product companies. Founders who decide faster and build with discipline are the ones who build successful companies and keep them running. In 2026, success belongs to makers who think like operators first, not creators of pretty candles, but builders of profitable systems, repeatable products, and brands with staying power. So when I started Noble Crown Fragrances, I made plenty of mistakes. I overbought vessels, I over-engineered packaging, I tested too many fragrance oils all at once. Then I launched 10 cents out of the gate before the market even asked me for one of them. It cost me money, time, and unnecessary complexity. But I also had an advantage. I approached scent like a product. I segmented early. I obsessed over my customers. I focused on quality that repeats, not trends that spiked. I learned about compliance before scale. I killed products that didn't earn their place, and I iterated quickly. Candles are flammable, heavy, and regulated. The cheapest candle you ever make is the one you never pour. And the smartest founders in 2026 validate with prototypes, not purchase orders. This episode isn't about starting a candle brand. It's about starting a candle business the right way, in the right order, without burning capital you can't recover. I am Burnett King, the founder of Noble Crown Fragrances, a company dedicated to elevating your space through the power of scent. The Noble Crown podcast is here to talk about the business of building a fragrance brand with tips, advice, and lessons learned that will help you reach your goals faster and learn more about the industry. So first, we're going to talk about the candle market in 2026. So we like to talk about saturation, right? And how candle markets are totally saturated. I don't buy that, but also it's crowded. I get it. But you can think about this versus segmentation, right? The demand for identity-driven brands is actually rising. So people want to be able to identify with the products that they're buying. And if you are in a market that is crowded, you need to be able to stand out. So you want to shift from hobby purchases, right? And, kind of creating these things that, they're nice, but they don't really have an identity. You want to shift that from that to a niche that resonates with you, or solving problems for specific customers. I'm going to run you through some example niches, just kind of throw some ideas out there to give you an idea of what could possibly work for a new candle business. And then I'll talk a little bit more about my niche specifically and how I got there and why it works for me. So first, let's talk about use case niches, right? These are how are people going to use the product, right? So one that I thought of just off the top of my head was around flameless candles, right? So there's this trend towards like wax melts and flameless things, right? And flameless is a particular need for customers, right? So think about college students where they're not allowed to have flames in their rooms. Teachers, the same situation, or even elderly populations, right, where flame might be dangerous. And so you want to be able to figure out a way to kind of market flameless candles. Another use case type scenario would be customers who want the strongest throw in a candle that they can find. So that's going to dictate the type of product that you're going to build. Somebody who's really concerned with smell and being able to smell something and being able to like have it overtake their entire space, they're going to need a certain type of wax. They're going to need super strong fragrance oils. And you really want to be able to tell that message that your product is super strong. Right. So those are some use case niches. Then you have occasion niches, right? So these are like events that you can build a business around. So the one I'm going to use is wedding planning, right? So wedding planning, you can even niche down within wedding planning. So gifts for bridal parties is one example. Tabletop decor, right? So the things that you put on the table, the candles that you put on the table or the scented products. And then wedding day signature scents, right? So a lot of brides and grooms want their wedding to smell a specific way. And one way you can, kind of market towards, hey, I will create a signature scent for you that's just your own. Now, I wouldn't necessarily niche down that specific if you're really trying to build a sustainable business, but I could see a business built around weddings and events, right? Again, occasion niches. The other niche that I'm going to walk you guys through is gifting. So gifting is always popular. Gifting is never going to go away. And so one example of this for candles could be high-end gifts for people that you don't know really well, right? There are occasions when you need to get a gift for somebody that you don't particularly know their tastes. So think about gift baskets. Think about realtor gifts, think about new residents of apartments, think about coworkers, right? All of these are kind of people that you know, but you don't really know them on a personal level. And so you want to be able to give them a gift that could work for them, right? And you could really build your brand around gifting. So let's talk a little bit about my niche. So my niche started as a minimalist interior design focused on obsessed customers who really want to use scent to elevate their space. And this kind of resonated with me, right? I'm very big into interior design. I'm not a minimalist by any means, but I thought that one problem that I kept encountering when I was buying candles and buying scented products were labels. All of these great smelling products had horrible labels or labels that totally clash with my interior design. And so I wanted to figure out a way that I could create a product that worked to elevate someone's space rather than clash with their space. And so that's how I created Noble Crown Fragrances. And that's really still the core of my brand and my business. So you want to think about niches, but you want to try to balance them, right? So they're broad enough that you can create multiple scents and products within that niche and not limit your creativity and also not limit your revenue growth. But you still want to be specific about who your customer is, what problem you're trying to solve for them, and what your niche is and how that ties to your brand and your products. So first, we're going to talk about some trends shaping the category right now, right? So in 2026, there's a move towards more premium vessels, right? So I would say we've kind of gone from the mason jar type candles to more sculptural or refillable or even collectible jars, right? And we've moved to that kind of premium vessel. And that's a trend that you're seeing right now. And I think this swings back and forth, right? Kind of people go all over the place with the types of jars that they're using for candles. Another trend that I'm seeing is cleaner formulas, right? So waxes that people perceive as cleaner, really clean oils and ingredients, phthalate free. These kind of paraffin free blends are on the rise again. And just this whole idea around wellness, cleanliness, safety. Now, whether any of that is actually accurate is a whole other discussion that we'll probably get into in another episode. But this trend towards clean formulas, wellness, inhaling products that are actually thought of or perceived of as clean is something that is a trend. And then another one is kind of experience-based retail, right? So if you're looking at retail or wanting to get into retail space, think about like scent as a storyteller or how does scent kind of transform your experience. This idea that retail isn't just about shopping and picking something off of shelf, but actually going and experience something when you go into a store or a space. What's on the decline, right? So those were all things that are increasing. What's on the decline? So I would say private label, kind of cookie cutter brands, right? Where you just slap your label on any scent or any generic looking candle vessel is kind of on the decline. Cute but kind of generic aesthetics, so you see the stuff on Instagram and other social media channels where everything kind of looks the same. Everything's kind of this cutesy feel, but it's very generic. There's no kind of brand identity with their product. And then cheaper waxes and kind of weaker fragrance products. So I think cheaper waxes typically get associated with being less clean, right? So that kind of goes against that trend that's on the rise. And so you're seeing a decline in kind of more inexpensive waxes. And then also weak fragrances, right? People are sick of buying candles that they can't actually smell, right? And I think there's a spectrum there. Like I can talk about this for hours about having a product selection that actually has a mix of weaker and stronger candles and why I think that's good for your business. But in general, people want stronger candles. They want to be able to smell what they're purchasing. We're also past this era of everybody wanting candles because they're stuck inside with COVID, right? So during COVID, people were just buying candles because they're stuck at home. They want it to smell nice. They want to be in a relaxing environment that they enjoy, right? Rather than feeling like they're trapped at home. But since that era, since we're back out, people are really not just buying candles the way that they used to. So that means there's probably less competition, right? New competition. Fewer people are getting into the candle market, which is good if you want to start your candle business. And then also there are candle makers that are not being able to sustain their actual business, right? And so they're going out of business. Again, less crowded in the market, but you still need to stand out because this is still a crowded market and there are low barriers to entry to starting a candle brand and starting a candle business. So you still need to stand out, right? Going back to what we talked about knowing your customer, defining a niche and focusing on that. And then also focus on revenue channels that will work for your products and your brand, right? So we'll get into this in a little more detail, but you don't want to necessarily be in the wrong kind of sales channel if your brand is not going to work there. So now we're going to talk about choosing your business model, right? Those sales channels. What's the best way to get your business started and built? So I would recommend doing one channel or maybe two when you first start, but we'll talk about each one and there are some kind of pros and cons to each. So first, let's talk about direct to consumer or online shopping, right? It's typically what we mean when we say direct to consumer nowadays. And so there are some advantages, higher margins, right? You don't have a middleman with wholesale, right? So you're getting kind of pure profit when you're selling directly to a customer. You don't have overhead space like a warehouse. Typically, you don't typically start in that kind of space. You don't have a retail space kind of dragging down your profit margins. But there are some disadvantages to direct to consumer. So slow growth, right? You have to do a lot of work on advertising and getting traffic to your website. And then there's a lot of kind of technical know-how on website optimization, right? And really getting people through what's called a sales funnel. So just because somebody's aware of your brand doesn't mean they're going to go to your website. Once they get to your website, it doesn't mean that they're going to buy. And then even if they add something to their cart, there may be blockers that stop them from making that final purchase. So direct to consumer, you really have to learn about optimization and getting people all the way through that process. It's not as easy as it sounds, but it is a high margin channel. The second one we're going to talk about is wholesale. So wholesale first, meaning you are creating products for other businesses to then resell. And there are lower margins, right? That's the biggest con, right? Wholesale, typically you are selling your products at half off of what you would sell at retail. It varies, but in general, 50% off. But you can scale a lot faster, right? So with wholesale, you can have kind of a viral approach, meaning if you get into a retailer that has a big kind of customer base, they're going to buy a lot of product from you, right? And if you get into another retailer, whether, they might have a big base, they might have a smaller customer base. It's a lot easier for you to scale across the nation even, right? You can start locally, right? I always recommend kind of starting locally and reaching out to stores in your area, but eventually you can network. You can take advantage of the network effect. Also, wholesale typically has better predictability with revenue, right? So if a store likes your product, they will reorder. And if you have a long-term relationship with that store, they will consistently reorder from you and on a pretty predictable schedule. So wholesale has some advantages, right? People get scared off by the lower margins, but if you're really looking to scale your business or have a long-term business, then wholesale is definitely something you want to look at. The next one, and where a lot of people start, is in person, right? So pop-ups, events, markets. This is a great way to get product validation. You talk directly to your customers, right? So online, you don't always get to know exactly how customers feel about your products, but you can get that in in-person events. You can also do customer research or pricing research, right? It's a lot easier to change things very quickly in person from one event to the next and kind of understand what people will resonate with or what they don't like. And then getting feedback, direct feedback from those customers. This is also good for cash flow, right? So you're kind of getting direct cash. Again, the margins are high, but it's unpredictable cash flow. So I did markets for a very long time, and I did a lot of markets, especially when I first went full time. The other advantage of in-person events is that you can, if you have another job, right, and you're still trying to create your candle business and just getting started, you can test the waters by doing markets while still maintaining your other job that you have. But it's very unpredictable cash flow, right? Some events are great, some events are terrible. You might make a ton of money at one event, and then you turn around and go to that same event and it's raining that day and nobody's coming there, right? Weather dependent. It's also grueling work. A lot of people don't talk about this, but it is backbreaking work, so to speak. You can really wear your energy levels down very quickly if you're doing a ton of events. I did over 150 events in 1 year. And I know that it can be very draining, right? Especially if you aren't making money at that event and you're feeling pretty bad. But I will say in person is one of my recommended ways to start. The next channel we're going to talk about is retail. So retail, setting up a store, right? It's very capital intense. This is one of the disadvantages. You have the real estate, and getting a lease on a commercial space is no enjoyable process. I'm in my warehouse here now, and so I understand what getting a lease is like. But then also labor, right? So for retail, you have to have consistent hours. You have to have consistent workers. If you're not doing it all yourself, any customers that are going to be trying to return to your store want to see consistency, and so it really is logistically intensive. You have to have marketing to drive foot traffic to your store. You have to have a clean store. You have to have something that works well for layouts. You have to think about what product selection you're going to carry in that store. But if your products are good and you get return business, this can be one of the highest revenue sales channels, right? Retail can be a great way. If you're in a great space, you have great workers, you have great product, you can have the highest revenue out of all of these channels, right? And then lastly, we'll talk about a hybrid model. So you can have direct to consumer, so online for margins. You can have wholesale for volume, in person for product validation, retail for consistency. But hybrids are really kind of for not starting out, right? I would say hybrid is a way to go once you have an established business and you know how to cater to each one of those sales channels and how to make your products and business and brand work for each one of those sales channels. If I only had to choose one to start with, I would either do online only or I would do in person only, right? Because I think online gets you the profit margins that you want to see, right? The cash flow, hopefully, that you want to see. It teaches you about advertising very quickly. It teaches you about how to build a website and optimizing your website, because if you don't get it to work, you're going to have to tweak it and make sure that it does work eventually in order to start seeing sales through that channel. And then in person is just great for the product validation, the customer feedback. There's no better way to understand if your product's any good than directly talking to people who are interested in your products. Those are kind of the business models that we would start out with or evaluate when we're looking at candle businesses. But my recommendation would be to pick one and kind of throw all of your energy into that one to start with. Next, we're going to talk about how to spend your money, right? So you need to maintain profitability. The biggest reason businesses go out of business is because they run out of cash, right? And so you need to figure out how to start your business and start your products and create your inventory in the most profitable way possible, right? And trust me, this is a lesson I learned and I continue to learn. But we're going to start with product and product fundamentals. So in the candle business, product testing is the most important part, but it's also the most expensive part. You want to test on a small level, right? So try not to do complicated tests with lots of SKUs, lots of products, lots of jars, vessels, different wax types. Don't worry about aesthetics when you're first starting out. You want to be able to make 3 to 5 prototypes before committing to any one supplier, right? And what I recommend is you start with one core wax, one type of wick, and one type of vessel. And I'll get into each one of those. So the one core wax, pick a wax based on what your customers want and something that is easy to obtain, right? So you want to make sure that the wax that you choose is actually going to resonate with what your customers want to buy. If you're going after that niche that we talked about that wants super strong candles, go paraffin. Go as much paraffin as you can. That is going to get you the strongest hot throw, right? If you want something that is easy to obtain, right, then you need to look at kind of what are the major waxes that are out there and how many suppliers have that specific wax. So there are paraffin blends, there are soy blends, there are coconut blends, there's even olive oil blends, right? And you want to see, if I choose a particular soy wax or maybe a soy paraffin blend, how many suppliers am I able to get that from, right? What we learned during COVID is that if a supplier runs out, they may not be able to get that very quickly, right? With all of these global supply chains that exist now, sometimes when a supplier goes out of stock, it's very unpredictable, and you need to be able to get your wax, specifically wax, from another supplier very quickly, because if you run out of wax, you don't have any product to create. One type of wick. So typically what I mean here is not one specific wick, because wicks are going to vary depending on the types of oils and wax that you use and the vessels that you use. But what I mean here is, are you going to go wood wicks? Are you going to go cotton wicks, right? Like pick a type to start with, and then kind of stick with that, and then start experimenting with the sizes. And that's going to depend more on your vessel. Again, your vessel is very important for your customers, right? Your customers are going to want to resonate with the first thing that they see. And typically the first thing they're seeing is your vessel. Sometimes it's packaging, right? And we'll talk about packaging later. But your vessel needs to identify with that customer. It needs to speak to them, whether that's a label or just the jar itself. But for testing purposes, once you pick a vessel and once you land on a vessel, you stick with it. Don't try to change it up. Don't do different sizes, even different colors. I wouldn't recommend. Just literally stick with one vessel, because that is going to simplify your testing quite a bit. So once we pick those three things, right, we're going to keep your SKUs as tight as possible. So a SKU is a stock keeping unit, meaning, I have this rose scented candle, and I have this aquatic candle, and I have this fruit flavored, fruit scented candle. Those would be 3 different SKUs. As soon as I add like another size, now I'm doubling that, right? So essentially I have 6 different SKUs. So at the start, you want to do 3 to 5 cents, I would say, until you have some demand data, right? And what I mean by demand data is, what are your customers like? What are they buying, right? And even not necessarily what they like, what are they actually buying? So you can guess at what your customers will like for the first 5 cents, but I like to start with a fragrance family approach. So try to appeal to have something for everyone, but still within that niche that you're building. So 1 citrus, 1 fruity, 1 floral, 1 woody, and 1 gourmand or food type candle, right? And that way you kind of have your bases covered, and then you can quickly get some data. Customers, especially if you're doing in person, they will tell you what they like and what they don't like. You can also use social media, right? Sales data, if you're working online. If you're doing direct to consumer websites, then you can get sales data. What are people actually buying? And then social media. If you have a social media following for your brand, and you should be building a social media following for your brand when you start, you can go on there and poll them. You can ask them to help you figure out what you should make, right? There's kind of free customer research that social media is very good for. Now, the SKU information. I didn't follow this advice, right? I designed a collection of 10 cents to start, and I liked that approach. I think it worked for my brand, but if I were restarting, I'd probably go a little simpler. I'd stick to that, 5 as a maximum, and really focus on trying to keep my process simple, so I wasn't spending as much money as I was in the beginning of building my business. You really want to be profitable, or as close to profitable as you can get when you're starting, because you're going to spend so much money on the testing phase. and you really want to be able to sell the inventory that you create. Once you have a product that's working, you want to be able to sell it, right? And so by having fewer SKUs, you're able to kind of push and operationally create more of that inventory faster and sell it faster. The next thing I would say is be smart about sourcing. So don't buy huge orders of wax, vessels, packaging, oils. Really, first of all, you're going to change your mind, right? So I've burned through so many types of vessels, so many types of packaging, so many oils, right? And if I were starting all over again and building my business again, I'd be a lot more focused. You can start by buying samples of all of these things, right? It'll cost you more upfront because you're not buying in bulk, but you can buy small amounts of these things, sell some of those products, get the data on what's working, and then you start buying in bulk, right? Don't start at the beginning by buying, 45 pounds of a particular wax. Start with the smaller, 5 pounds, test it out. Once you've got your product down, once you see what's selling, then move up to the full size, kind of 45-pound cases. And then hopefully you're getting up to the point where you can buy, a half pallet, a pallet of wax at a time, right? That's going to be a ways off. But you want to start small, get some data, and then start buying bigger. The next thing I would understand about spending your money is compliance. So insurance, rules, regulations, like all this kind of unsexy stuff, right? Don't kill your business before you start by not following the appropriate laws and regulations for your region. You want to get business and product liability insurance. Remember, candles are flammable products. People tend to forget this when they're thinking about insurance. Don't skimp when it comes to things on keeping your business and your customers safe. I would say insurance is, as soon as you think you have a product that you want to sell, get the insurance. You can do research, you can do it in a cost-effective way, but make sure you have it, because all it takes is one incident or even something that is not an incident and a customer wants to sue you. There goes your business, right? If you don't have insurance. Also, learn about IFRA. So IFRA is a International Fragrance Association that works on what chemicals are safe at what levels. So candles are a little more relaxed, but you still need to understand, for this oil that I'm using, how much of it can I put into a candle? And so IFRA will help you understand that. Your wax manufacturers will help you understand that. Learn all about those rules, because a safe product is number one. Also think about labeling rules, right? So if you're putting labels on your product, where that label needs to be, and what all needs to be included on that label. Now that's going to vary per region, so make sure you're kind of researching to figure out what works in your area. Then here's a bonus tip, because a lot of people forget this one, is thinking about your brand name, your website name, your social media handles, trademarks, all of that stuff early. I know I say, kind of test into things, but when it comes to getting a domain name that you want, you'll be very upset if you pick a brand name and then you're not able to get the website that you want, or the social media handles that you want. Trademarks can wait a little bit, but start earlier in the process than you would naturally think. Now, where to avoid spending money on, right? Because it's easy to spend money everywhere, but you need to figure out some places where you want to hold back. Different color jars. Start with something simple. Start with clear, white, black, something neutral, right? If that's what goes with your brand. Now, if you are kind of a young, fun brand that's kind of marketed to younger people, you might want to start with pink jars, right? But I would say literally only do that pink jar. Again, we talked about SKUs. The other thing to think about is out of stock. So if you have 8 different color jars, you're going to be out of stock of something eventually, right? And then people are like, oh, I really wanted your green jar. You're out of stock. Yeah, and now I can't get it because it's sold out at my supplier. Or you end up with some color that just doesn't sell, right? Dead inventory. Another area to avoid spending on is influencers. So we haven't even proven that our products are going to resonate with customers. Don't start spending on influencers until you know you have a proven product. Yeah, it might be an effective way, and I can do a whole episode on influencers, but it might be an effective way to get more reach around your product and your brand, but you don't know if you have a proven product. And if you're selling candles that nobody wants, or an influencer is pushing candles that nobody wants, you're not going to end up in a good spot. Another place to save on is excess sample inventory. Try not to buy every fragrance oil in existence. I know it's hard, right? Fragrance oils, that's the fun part of making candles for a lot of people, is the different scents and trying out different combinations. But be focused on the scents that you want to create for your target customers and figure out which oils might get you to that specific product. Another place to skimp is on trendy items or trendy products. Again, you want to start by focusing on core products that will sell all year round and across multiple years first, right? Multiple seasons. Once your operations are up and running and you're nimble enough and you've been doing this a long enough time, you can then focus on seasonal items and then trends, right? Trends I kind of put at the bottom, right? You have to really be quick with production and selling because trends are trendy and they disappear. So you don't want to be stuck with a bunch of product that you can't sell because you were too slow. And then the last one, this is one I've wasted so much money on, is over engineering your packaging. It's a hard lesson that I've learned, but I've gotten better, right? Start basic and simple. So you want to give the impression that your customers expect, but you want to do it for as cheaply as possible and then refine it over time. You can always buy in larger quantities once you know exactly what works logistically and what works for your customers, but don't overspend at the beginning. The next section of kind of where to spend your money or how to think about money is costs and pricing, right? So the cheapest candle to make is the one you never produce. If something is going to be too expensive or inexpensive for your target customer, do not make that product. Okay. Do not make a candle that nobody is going to buy. You might love it, but is your target customer going to love it? Is it going to be too expensive based off of what you need to maintain a profit margin? Another place that people get tripped up early on is around labor costs. So if it's just you starting, don't try to calculate labor into your costs. There's plenty of other tangible costs that you need to worry about. So jars, wax, wicks, oils, labels, packaging, wick stickers. Like literally think about the tangible costs before you start thinking about overhead. You can work that in. It is easier to lower prices, but also know your product's worth and your time value, right? So you need to be able to value your product at the right price in order to stay in business. And hopefully that is aligning with what your customers want. And we'll kind of reverse engineer that here in a second. You also can raise prices. It's not as hard as people think, especially early on in your business when people haven't become loyal customers yet. You can also raise prices. So don't be afraid to do that. Now, reverse engineering a price, right? So think about it this way. How much will your ideal customer pay for a candle of size X with Y packaging, right? What are similar brands charging for this kind of product? What kind of profitability do I want to maintain on this product, right? So if I want 60 to 80% margins on a retail, if I'm selling direct to consumer candle, then what does that mean for the cost, right? So if I'm selling this candle for $40, let's say, then do I need to be able to make this for $10 to stay profitable? Then, okay, I have $10. How much are my vessels going to cost? How much wax am I using? How much fragrance oil am I using? What type of wicks am I using? What kind of packaging, or, should I include packaging, labels, etc., right? You need to think about all of that. So kind of start with, hey, here's what my ideal customer is willing to pay for something about this size and this look. Then reverse engineer it and go back to, okay, here's what I need to make that at for this cost. Also, one thing that people forget about, shipping costs. Candles are typically heavy things to ship. If you're shipping glass with a bunch of weight in it, then you need to think about shipping costs if you're doing direct to consumer or wholesale. So don't forget about shipping costs. Bake that into your price, or charge people directly. That I typically go free shipping over a certain level. Or wholesale, typically wholesale retailers are paying for the shipping. So think about that when you are baking out your costs and baking out your prices. Okay. And then one final bonus tip for this whole kind of pricing, cost, money section. Don't become attached to your products. So what does that mean? You want to remove the losers from your product selection very early on. This will allow you to expand into scent families that you don't have or scent families that your customers love. So if you have a candle that just will not sell, it is your favorite candle on earth, but none of your customers want it and you have a ton of inventory, then you need to get rid of it. And you can do that through a sale. You can give them away, whatever it is, right? When you're starting early on, I would say do not be attached to any particular product. Once you have a core number of scents, so again, think 3 to maybe up to 7 now at this point as you're kind of ramping up your business, you can start thinking about seasonal scents or trendier scents, right? But start out with that core, remove any of the ones that are not working, and reformulate. Let's bring this all together, right? So we're going to go through a checklist of everything you need to do when you're starting your candle business in 2026. So determine your customer and the problem you're trying to solve, right? Again, niche. That you hear that term niche, it works for a reason. So determine that customer and what problem you're trying to solve. Build your brand around that identity, and then go out and get the names, the web domains, the social media handles, like all of that fun stuff. Go do that first step. Then you're going to want to pick a wax blend, a wick, and a vessel. Ideally, one of each, right? Within wicks, yes, they're going to be different sizes, but try to keep it simple because product testing is the most expensive and most time-consuming piece of all of this. Test 3 to 5 scents thoroughly. Don't sell a candle before you know the product is safe. Scents react differently in wax, and they react differently to different wicks. So you need to figure out sizing, and you need to make sure your product is safe. Do tons of testing. You want to do burn testing. You want to see how it burns at the top of the vessel, the middle of the vessel, the very bottom of the vessel. You trust me, customers have told me all types of wild stories about how they handle my candles that shock me, right? They go to sleep with them. They put them under fans and air conditioning where the flame is blowing around. You want to test for every crazy scenario that you can think of and make sure that it's safe. Then be compliant. Make sure you buy insurance, get to know IFRA regulations, label regulations, and what's safe and compliant for your region. Then you'll want to pick the sales channel that works for you. Again, try to start with 1 or 2 at max. You can always change or add them later, but start with something that is going to work for your brand. And you know your brand better than anyone, and you want to build your business in a particular sales channel and then start expanding. Set up that sales channel, right? So get into events. You got to go get into those events if you're doing in-person activities. You have to set up a website if you're doing online. If you want wholesale, you got to do a lot of outreach. You're going to hear a lot of no's before you hear any yeses. If you want to start with retail, you need to look for a storefront. That's a very long process. So make sure that you are doing the activities to get you set up for success in that particular sales channel. One that I didn't hit earlier, but you want to make sure that whatever channel you're in, start email capture. So make sure that you're getting people's emails and SMS if you can for those particular sales channels. So if you're doing it online, that's typically a pop-up form or something to get them interested in your email newsletter that you're eventually going to create. If it's that in person, you can do giveaways to collect emails. You can just ask. You can have a sign-up sheet. You can buy a point of sale system that captures people's emails. Make sure you get some way to follow up with people that have already purchased from you or that are interested in purchasing from you. Don't forget about product photography. This is another one we didn't really talk about, but you'll need it eventually, right? Whether it's for your website, social media, Etsy, Fair, whatever it is, you're going to eventually need some product photography. So kind of sprinkle that in when you have some time. And then launch before you're completely ready. So don't launch before you have a safe product, but launch before you feel like you are ready. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough, right? You need to be able to just get your products out there, get some feedback, because the sooner you do that, the better you can iterate. You're going to fail. Products are going to fail. Things are not going to go to plan. You want to get all of that out of your system quickly. And guess what? You're going to keep failing, but you iterate and you learn and you take from that. So if you take one thing from today, start with the customer and the problem you exist to solve. That is where differentiation begins. Be unique, be distinct, not decorative. Candles can be art, but the business has to be the architecture. So use 2026 to build fewer, stronger products, Scents and formats that prove themselves, repeat cleanly, scale intelligently, invest early in testing, sampling, and compliance. Those aren't costs. They're competitive advantages, and you're investing in your business. So your longevity will come from discipline, right? Your margins will endure when your products are built to last, and your brand will win when it evolves without imitating. So build something real, differentiate with intention, let your business outlive the trend. So thanks for listening to the Noble Crown Podcast. Like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and I'll talk to you in the next one.